Maraming salamat. Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum. Thank you for this invitation to speak to the Ateneo de Manila community this afternoon. Many of you may be wondering why an unknown like me would dare to run for the Senate. I will also tell you my reason in a while, but first allow me to introduce myself. I am Yasmin Busran Lao, a woman, a Moro, and a Muslim. Ordinarily, my being these three would not matter. They are just parts of my identity that define me as a person. However, as I go through life, I realize that they do matter. On account of my being a woman, a Moro, and a Muslim, I came to know the meaning of violence, discrimination, injustice, and inequality. I not only witnessed them as a regular occurrence within my family and community, I have been personally living through them ever since I was a child. I was born in Mindanao, in Marawi City. Even then, Mindanao was already racked with conflict between the government and the Moro people, between Christians and Muslims. I am a child of this conflict, a witness to the atrocities committed against the Moro people, especially during the 70s at the height of the Moro rebellion. Many of those in my generation who are now already in their 40s or 50s still carry with us the trauma of that period. Excuse me. For how can we forget the massacres of countless of Moros, the burning of our houses and mosques, the seizing of our farms and lands, and the looting of our properties, our entire communities driven away and forced to live in the evacuation camps or leave Mindanao altogether. Even now, 4 decades later, this same scenario is still playing out in Mindanao. Entire families are still living in evacuation camps to escape armed clashes between Moro rebels and the military, or to escape armed confrontations between clans. These camps are anything but places of safety and refuge. The conditions there are not favorable to one's peace of mind nor sense of dignity, especially for the women and children. Imagine, if you can, that you're a mother in an evacuation camp. Your family does not have access to food, clean water, safe shelter, and sanitation. Your children's schooling is interrupted. Your health and your children's health deteriorate. It is so easy for diseases to spread when you're living in such crowded quarters. You lose your regular source of income. The rule in evacuation center or evacuation camp is survival of the fittest. The stronger ones, usually the men, bully and harass women, especially when it comes to the distribution of food and whatever relief goods find their way into the camps. Some women, particularly widows and the young ones, agree to become second or third wives just so that they could have their male protectors. Women also become vulnerable to violence such as rape and sexual abuse. But they cannot get justice for this violation done to them simply because there is no rule of law in evacuation camps. Anarchy most often rules there. This situation of powerlessness and gender injustice exists not just in evacuation camps. It is also present in Muslim society. I know that most of you have the impression that women are oppressed under Islam. In theory, however, women's position in Islam, as taught by the Quran, the sacred book of the Muslims, is one of equality with men. Much of the Islamic practices and laws considered oppressive to women are in fact unrelated to Islam. Instead, they are based on cultural and traditional customs that are largely anchored on patriarchy and are legislated and enforced by men. Nowhere in this more glaringly evident in Mindanao than when warlords and imams exclude women in peace processes. They do not believe they should be part of them. This is because for generations, women are considered inferior to men and must concern themselves only with matters involving the family and the home. To which I say, enough. I firmly believe that peace negotiations and peace building must not only be between the armed combatants. They must also include those affected by war, especially women who bear no arms but who suffer its heaviest costs. Women bring concerns to the negotiating table that are often forgotten or ignored, such as the need for health and education among the affected populace, the healing of victims from the trauma of war, the rehabilitation of communities, and reconciliation among combatants. Together with other peace advocates, I have made it my mission to work for peace in Mindanao and to put justice and gender equality at the center of our peace-building efforts. Through the years, we have created venues for diverse stakeholders to come together, share perspectives, and collaborate in addressing the various peace, governance, poverty, and other social issues confronting Mindanao. This is why, when I was invited to join the LP's senatorial slate, I decided to accept it despite the many reasons that came to my mind why I should refuse it. It is now time for me to walk my talk. How many times have I talked about strategies and action points to secure peace in Mindanao and peace among Muslim and Christian Filipinos? How many times have I talked about the need for women to claim their spaces and voices by participating in politics and decision-making? How many times have I talked about including gender values and principles in transforming governance? Now translate my talk to a legislative agenda that I will pursue once I am in the Senate, that is to bring this message of hope that we can achieve lasting peace, justice, and equality among all Filipinos, regardless of gender, ethnicity, and religion. I believe we can build a country that is inclusive and respectful of each other's differences. Now let me go now to our specific topic this afternoon, private armies and terrorism. These are two distinct topics even though they have some connections. They also need to be distinguished from the major armed conflicts in the country. The decades of conflict between the government and the communist insurgency, and the conflict between the government and the Moro National Liberation Front, and now the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. The issues of private armies and terrorism are different but related to and have affected the armed conflicts and affect us, all of us as Filipinos. As you've said, we also had our share of bombing and terrorist acts here in Metro Manila. I will discuss first the broader topic of terrorism. Unfortunately, this is an issue that has particular impact on Muslims who have often, especially after 9/11, become the face of terrorism globally and locally. It is also true that acts of terrorism have been perpetrated by some groups and individuals who profess to Islam. We have all heard about the Abu Sayyaf group and their acts of their kidnapping, beheadings, and bombings. But first, we should all know that nothing in Islam condones terrorism and violence. In fact, in the Quran, it speaks about if one innocent life is killed, it's as if you've killed the entire humanity. And it also speaks about the right of every person, when there's no rule of law, the right of that person for vengeance. But forgiveness is still the best. So there's nothing in Islam that promotes or encourages, rather it condemns terrorism. Unfortunately, because of this, there has been a tendency for the terrorist profiling of Muslims, leading to human violations of the rights of innocent persons, their arrests and incarceration, torture, and to previous discrimination because of being other is added the layer of discrimination because of fear. So because they're Muslims, they're being othered. You may be an MNLF fighter or a kidnapper or an innocent trader or preacher, but once you are labeled as Abu Sayyaf, it is as if anything can be done to you. Nobody cares or tries to defend you because you are Abu Sayyaf. And so human rights are gone, as if you don't have any rights once you're labeled an Abu Sayyaf. However, it is not only Muslims who have been labeled terrorists. Leftists and communists and their allies have also been called terrorists, and so their extrajudicial killing or salvaging of terrorists or communists or leftists is justified. Or like Jonas Burgos,